replicate the victory that our newest councillor, Robin Kleinman, secured when he took Dunblane and Bridge of Allen from the SNP. What a fantastic result. What a fantastic result from Robin and his team. They fought a fantastic by-election campaign, and I congratulate them again today. But our councillors, our MSPs and our MPs aren't just elected because of the work they do in our communities. They are elected because of the hard graft of you, our members. Fundraising, leafleting, canvassing, and of course those endless calls by telephone when the elections come. Our members are the backbone of our party. So thank you to each and every one of you for everything you do and everything that you contribute to our party. And thank you to Charles Kennedy and the Management Board and the team at SCCO for organising this conference, and it's fantastic to see so many of you here today. And thank you for all the work that they do all year round. But can I say a special thank you, and I can't see him in the audience, but I'm sure he is here, to my friend and our former chairman, Rab Foreman. Rab served as chairman for 7 years, driving our electoral success alongside Douglas and Ruth. Rab, everyone in this hall and everyone in our party owes you a debt of gratitude, so thank you. But members, there is much more that we can do for you, and that's why Douglas, as Charles said, has invited Jackson Carlaw to lead a new commission into members' engagement. Jackson has been speaking with members right across the country, and we will hear more from him tomorrow. Because conference across Scotland, we are working hard towards next year's general election, and that will be a critical building block towards electing Douglas Ross as Scotland's next First Minister. In 2021, Douglas secured more votes than ever before in any Scottish Parliament election since devolution, and we maintained a record 31 seats at Holyrood. And next year we want to deliver a double whammy, to defeat the SNP at the general election and to play our part in returning Rishi Sunak for a historic fifth-term Conservative government. Conference, that is the prize, and it is within our grasp. And in a few moments we'll hear from Rishi for the first time since he became our leader and Prime Minister. A Prime Minister for each and every part of our United Kingdom. A Prime Minister who supported 1 million Scottish jobs through the pandemic. A Prime Minister committed to levelling up. And a Prime Minister committed to delivering for our cities, towns and rural communities. More than ever, Scotland needs a political party focused on the issues that really matter. And when the next election comes, we will be ready to show that it's the Scottish Conservative Party and the Scottish Conservative Party alone that is focused on the people's real priorities. Thank you very much and enjoy conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Annie Wells, MSP.
Good morning, conference. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, it is my privilege to introduce Rishi Sunak and welcome him to Scotland and of course to Glasgow for this Scottish Conservative Conference. And we are delighted that he's chosen to come and answer some questions from members today. The Prime Minister, of course, is no stranger here. One of the notable aspects of his leadership has been his obvious commitment to every part of the United Kingdom. He has been thoroughly committed to getting Scotland's both governments to work together and deliver on Scotland's real priorities. In quite a difference from the SNP, a party with the deliberate aim of destroying, devolution and breaking up the UK, in which in government views everything in terms of how to stoke division. In fact, they're so addicted to making everything antagonistic that these days they're not just attacking Westminster, but tearing their own party to pieces. That may be no more than they deserve, after years of neglecting the job of government for their constitutional obsessions and manufactured grievances. But Scotland deserves so much better than their incompetence and disastrous mishandling of our finances. But by contrast, Rishi Sunak as Chancellor during the pandemic and then as Prime Minister during a global cost of living crisis has made it clear that it is the UK's pooled resources that has enabled us to get through difficult times together. And it's thanks to the UK's shared strengths and priorities that crucial support for individuals and businesses has been available. That a Conservative and Unionist government has been able to shield the economy and set it on a path to growth with renewed vigour, that will in turn enable us to steer a course to greater prosperity. Those shared goals and that Conservative approach was once very Scottish qualities. It was in Glasgow University that Adam Smith provided insights into the virtue and value of trade and markets that helped spark Scottish Enlightenment. It was here that Scottish innovation, manufacturing prowess and enterprise combined to drive the Industrial Revolution and make Glasgow the second city of the empire. But it is a shame that one of the city's major products now seems to be that of a leader and an ex-leader of a nationalist government alongside a nationalist Glasgow City Council who seem determined to destroy or dismantle that legacy. And it's not just that Scotland is much stronger as part of the UK, it's that Scotland is, and always has been, a central and tightly integrated part of one of the world's largest economies and most influential nations. The majority of Scots don't want that torn apart, and we will always oppose it with all of our might. Across the country, the record of the SNP Green government and their policies, and the policies of other parties, has been truly dismal. The Nationalists have delivered a series of unqualified disasters, from non-existent extortionate ferries to the catastrophically botched deposit return scheme. A health service on its knees, schools with plummeting results, the worst drug deaths in Europe. But more often than not, the other parties have lined up to vote with them, from the unpopular and ill-thought-out gender recognition bill to making Scotland the highest taxed part of the UK. The other parties might not waste as much money on doomed court cases on the issues that are opposed by Scots the most, but they have no different solutions. Only the Conservatives, both in the UK and at Holyrood, have a strong, credible and practical set of plans that address the real priorities of Scots. It's why we are confident that we can continue to deliver for people all across the country. It's why we expect to make gains in Scottish seats and win the next general election. So, conference, I ask you to join me in welcoming the man who will deliver that victory, our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, please. Thank you for the incredibly warm reception. It is great to be amongst so many fellow Conservatives. Now, let me also just say, a lot has happened since we were last all together. We're providing incredible support to help families with the cost of living, £1,500, around half typical family's energy bill. We're strengthening our security with a landmark new defence agreement with Australia and America. We're joining the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, trillions of pounds linking us to the fastest growing economies in the world. And finally, Nicola Sturgeon has quit Butte House to take up driving lessons. Well, I tell you, because someone's got to drive that motorhome after all. Now, I wanted to start by paying tribute to Douglas. Now, a couple of years ago, Douglas fought very hard to deny Nicola Sturgeon the majority that she wanted. And with all of your help, he did that. And imagine how different things would have been if she'd got that majority. She would have pushed an even more divisive agenda, but that didn't happen. You changed the course, and now she's gone. So I think all of you will want to join me in saying thank you to Douglas. Douglas is supported by a great team of councillors and MSPs here, but I also wanted to take a second to say thank you to my dear friend and your Scottish Secretary, Alistair Jack. Now, Alistair is not only an incredible voice for Scotland around the cabinet table. I know, like me, you would have all felt an enormous sense of pride when you saw Alistair as a member of the company of archers representing Scotland standing guard around Her late Majesty's coffin in Westminster Hall. Alistair, thank you for everything that you do. Now, it used to be that the SNP couldn't focus on Scotland's priorities because they were obsessed about independence. Now, even they admit that there is not a sustained majority in support of independence, and yet they're still distracted. And as many of you have rightly said, if the SNP can't sort out the mess that Nicola Sturgeon left their party, how on earth can they sort out the mess that Nicola Sturgeon has left Scotland's public services in? Now, what we need is a government in Holyrood that is focused on Scottish people's real priorities, not constitutional abstractions. Now, the SNP may not be able to find some auditors for their party, but we can certainly audit their record in government. Just take a look at the education attainment gap, the very thing that Nicola Sturgeon said that they should be judged on. That gap widening. Violent crime rising. And they can't even deliver the ferries that they promised the islanders. It is a record of failure, and one that Douglas and all of you have done wonders to call out and hold them accountable for. Now, meanwhile, we've been getting on, delivering. Just this week, almost 750,000 Scottish families receiving direct financial help with the cost of living. Just like during the pandemic with furlough, you saw the power and the might of the UK government to support the most vulnerable families in Scotland, demonstrating the benefit of Scotland being inside our precious United Kingdom. Now, at the beginning of the year, I set out 5 priorities: to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists, and to stop the boats. I know that we can move forward and make sure that those things happen. I'm confident that that's what we'll do. And just imagine how different politics will feel with inflation falling and low again, the economy growing again, public services back to where we want them to be post-COVID. And I know that because I only promise what I can deliver, and I will deliver what I promise. And Scotland is at the heart of my plans for delivery. That's why the Chancellor came here to announce the Edinburgh reforms in Scotland, supporting Scotland's financial services industry, which is world-leading. And we want to create the jobs of the future and make sure that industry remains competitive. It's why we're funding a supercomputer in Scotland to take advantage of all the innovation that the modern economy is going to see and need. It's why we're spending over £1 billion in towns and communities and villages up and down Scotland to support local projects through levelling up. It's why we alone are the party that supports Scotland's North Sea oil and gas industry because we know we need to increase our energy security, not increase our reliance on Vladimir Putin. And it's why, when I was last here, we announced the creation of 2 new free ports. What a fantastic example of a Conservative government delivering for the people of Scotland. 2 free ports with new funding, special economic zones that will attract investment, increase trade, and most crucially create jobs for our young people in the industries of the future. And that, in a nutshell, is what we are about. That is the vision that the Conservatives deliver. It's a future for our young people that is filled with opportunity, filled with hope, filled with optimism, a confidence that that future will be better for the next generation than it is today. That is what the Conservatives deliver in government. And I'll say this to conclude. Under my leadership, we will never, ever forget that we are the Conservative and Unionist Party, and working together, all of us, proudly as Conservatives, we will deliver for each and every part of our precious United Kingdom. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, Douglas was not going to allow me to leave without answering all of your questions. So here he is with a very long clipboard, as far as I can see.
Very long. Prime Minister, every week I ask a political leader a series of questions and very rarely get answers. So I'm looking forward today to hear your answers on a number of questions that's been submitted from our members. But maybe, first of all, from me, you spoke about your priorities and the 5 priorities of you and your government and how you're going to achieve those. Here in Scotland, we don't have that. We don't have priorities from the SNP, from Humza Yousaf. How do we manage that? How do we look at the leadership you're providing at a UK level and the distraction we're getting from the real priorities from the Scottish Government here?
Well, I think, Douglas, you guys do a great job here of holding the SNP government to account. And that's what you should be doing. And whether it's on schools, whether it's on the NHS, whether it's on crime, all things that the Scottish Government is in control of, not the UK Government. It's right that you call out their record on all of these things, and you're doing it brilliantly, and people can see that. Now, when it comes to the priorities that we've set out, they're actually, in the most part, apply to the entire country. The exception, obviously, of the NHS, which is a devolved responsibility. But if you look at the first 3, they're all economic, and that is deliberate. Because right now, if you talk to anybody in any part of the United Kingdom, the issue that they care most about is the cost of living. And I think that's where all of us can demonstrate to the people of Scotland what we are doing to help ease the burden on the cost of living. I talked about the £1,500. That's the value of the support we're providing right now to a typical family in Scotland. It's about half of their energy bill that the UK government is bearing the cost of because these are exceptional times. I talked about what we're doing just this week for the most vulnerable families. They're receiving extra help. The first of those payments went out this week to almost 750,000 Scottish people. More to come later this year, pensioners later. Now, that's a UK government getting on and standing behind the people of Scotland. And over the course of the year, as we see inflation come down, we'll all be able to stand up and say to the people, our plan worked. You can feel that it's working. You'll feel that you have more money in your bank account at the end of every month. And that's something that we will have done as Conservatives and had nothing to do with the SNP.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've had so many questions in from members in the hall and across Scotland who have wanted to put some points to you. So let me first of all go to Mark from Edinburgh. He's asked about your government's approach to dealing with the SNP, with the Scottish Government. Clearly, Scotland has 2 governments and most people want the governments to work together, but we in this room and the majority of people across Scotland also want want you to continue to hold firm against their plans for another divisive independence referendum. You met Hamza Yousaf earlier on this week. How do you balance that between holding firm on the union but working constructively where you can with the Scottish Government?
I think you just summarised it, Douglas. That's exactly what we need to do. When I saw him, I was completely firm about independence, and I will always be completely firm. That's not a priority of the Scottish people. As he himself admitted over the summer, I think he said there's no sustained majority for independence, and they would do well to remember that and stop being distracted and obsessing with it. But as we have all worked together very well, you and Alistair, me and Michael Gove as well, you know, we're very clear that we want to demonstrate to the people of Scotland that we can and we will work constructively together with the Scottish Government to deliver for the people of Scotland. Because I think, as you said, Douglas, that's what they want. Yeah. So free ports are a good example of that. That was a UK government idea. It's a post-Brexit opportunity. And through a slightly tortuous process that Alistair had to run, finally the SNP accepted that actually it was a good thing because the businesses and people of Scotland all wanted it to happen in Scotland. They didn't want to be left behind, the rest of the UK. And they agreed in the end, and that's why we're now delivering 2 free ports. That's a great way for us to demonstrate our willingness to work constructively together, and I think ultimately that's in our long-term political interest to show people that that's what we're about.
Yeah. Lots of our members have put in questions about devolution, including Sheila from Stirling. She's asked, what do you see as a way forward for devolution in Scotland?
So I'd say a couple of things. One is we can't devolve and forget, right? Scotland already is the most powerful devolved assembly anywhere in the world. So all this talk of needing any more powers is clearly not appropriate, right? Doesn't even use all the SNP and the Scottish Government don't even use all the powers they already have. So we shouldn't stop talking about any more. What we need to do is hold them to account, as we're all doing, and we're going to do some things. I talked about it with you over the summer. How can we make it easier to hold the Scottish Government to account, to make sure that there's comparability of data across the UK, something that you've talked a lot about and your colleagues in the Scottish Parliament. How can we make sure that we can compare what's going on in every part of the UK so we can practically make a difference there? But also, we believe in real devolution as Conservatives. You know, we believe decisions should be made as close to people as possible. And we know that in the same way that Westminster doesn't always know best, it's not the case that in Scotland that the SNP and the Holyrood government always know best. So what we believe is we can devolve power to local communities. And that's what we've done, and it's something that you and Alistair championed rightly. So now the UK government is being far more engaged and involved when it comes to levelling up, investing directly in local communities across Scotland. And I think, as you've all seen, that's been really healthy. It's been brilliant because those local councils, those local communities are really keen to engage with the UK government. They know what the priorities of their local areas are, more so than Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP do. And they've responded really well to that, and it's a way for us to demonstrate the benefit of the UK government in Scotland. We don't have to just hand everything over to the Scottish government. And I think that's real devolution, right? There's devolution in action at a very local level.
Yeah. And sticking with devolution, because of the tax-varying powers, Scotland under the SNP is the highest tax part of the United Kingdom. John from Peebles and Anne from Aberdeen are asking, what would you say to those who are concerned about the impact that's having on individuals and businesses here in Scotland?
Well, it is having an impact. I mean, when I'm here and I talk to businesses and I talk to people, they raise it proactively with me. I mean, it's not a great tagline. Scotland's the highest tax place inside the United Kingdom, right? It's not a great advert. And you all have done a brilliant job of pointing that out, holding the SNP government to account for it. And what I want to do over time, I've said this, I said it as Chancellor, I've said it as Prime Minister, the Chancellor said it, look, our desire as Conservatives is to reduce the burden of tax on working people, right? That's what we all believe. Now, we know things are difficult right now, and we're getting through the aftermath of COVID and the inflation pressures that we're seeing from Ukraine and Russia's invasion. But look, when we can, of course we want to reduce taxes, because as Conservatives, we all know we want people to have more money in their own pockets. We trust them to spend it better than the government, and it's clear that the SNP don't believe that, and we shouldn't tire of pointing that out.
Yeah. And taxation may come into this next question. Cameron from Inverness has asked, how can we ensure that young aspirational professionals remain here in Scotland?
You know, I'm actually really positive that we can do that because of the incredible strengths and talents of the people in Scotland and the ingenuity of your businesses. If you think about it, I talked about financial services, right? It's no accident the Chancellor came here to announce his changes to financial services regulation. It's because you've got one of the most amazing financial services sectors anywhere in the UK, full of really, and it's not just the big companies, it's full of young, interesting startups, entrepreneurial companies involved in fintech. Now, that's why I think as we can take advantage of Brexit, reform regulations, make sure that this is the best place to start to grow a company, then we will be able to keep those young people here in Scotland, and that's my vision. And when someone asks me, what does levelling up mean to you? That's what I say. I say it means that you've got to be able to fulfill all your dreams in the place that you grew up in. You shouldn't have to leave. And that is definitely the case here. And with our policies, with the things we're doing to support entrepreneurship, that's the way that we can build quite an attractive opportunity set for young people. And again, the Chancellor's announcement of a supercomputer being funded here in Scotland, that just speaks to your innovation economy. That's how we create the jobs of the future. It all comes out of innovation. And that innovation is happening here because of the talent of the Scottish people. So I'm incredibly excited about it, but as you say, it's the SNP government's policies, whether it's on tax and regulation, that are damaging that business confidence. Our job is to ensure that we can keep promoting that.
You speak about fulfilling your dreams. That's what levelling up is all about. I think Michael Gove takes that to quite an extreme extent when he goes to the dance floor every time he's back in Aberdeen. That's clearly fulfilling his dreams there. We've discussed jobs, and you mentioned in your remarks about the energy sector, and we've had a lot of comments on this. Sandy from Fochabers, MJ from Hopeman, so very strong Murray links here. Rebecca from East Kilbride and Daniela from Aberdeen all asked about the support for nuclear, renewable energy and oil and gas. What's your government doing on these issues?
Well, I saw him somewhere. Where is he? There he is.
Right in the front there.
Andrew Bowie, in his new job, does everyone know this? He's got a new name. His new name, Grant Shapps calls him Atomic Bowie. And that's because he's our one-man advocate for the nuclear industry as well as the oil and gas industry. No, look, this is probably one of the most exciting economic opportunities for the UK, but for Scotland specifically. And in all those industries that you mentioned, but in particular, carbon capture and storage, hydrogen, offshore wind, we are already either world leaders, right, or we're going to be. Look at offshore wind. Not only does the UK home to the largest offshore wind farm, it's also home to the second largest, the third largest, the fourth largest, right? And that is thanks to Scottish ingenuity. Carbon capture and storage. Look across Europe. I think something like 85, Andrew will correct me if I'm wrong, but something like 85% of all of Europe's storage capacity for carbon capture and storage is in the North Sea. And that's why we're doing the free ports. That's why we're investing in R&D. And, I have this vision. Someone said it to me, and I think we can do it, right? It was once upon a time when it came to oil and gas, it was Scottish voices that you could hear across the world, because we figured out how to do it here, you all figured out how to do it, and then we exported that talent, that technology, that expertise to everywhere else. We're going to do that again. Scotland is going to do that again in all these new industries of the future, and that's why we're the government that can deliver it, because we understand it. And I mentioned it in my remarks. Right? We're the only party that unequivocally supports the North Sea industry, right? I mean, it's extraordinary when we've got a war going on which has highlighted the issue of being dependent on places like Russia for fossil fuels, that these other parties think that we should ignore what we have at home, ignore the economic benefits, the jobs, ignore the energy security, and increase our reliance on foreign dictators for energy that we know we need for the next couple of decades. And by the way, all the skills in that industry are transferable to all these new industries. So I think when in this incredibly important area, that we are absolutely the party that's going to deliver, and it's going to be incredibly exciting for Scotland.
Yeah, absolutely. And the applause here rightly started by Greg Hands, who, before he became UK Party Chairman, an outstanding Energy Minister who came here, took the fight to the SNP here in Scotland and has been laying this out for many, many years. You've mentioned it, and not to give too much away, there'll be more on that in my speech later on this afternoon as well. But when we speak about offshore energy and the potential with renewables there's also an outstanding industry in Scotland around the fishing sector.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth from Peterhead has asked, how can the UK government support funding and further funding for the fishing industry to make sure it benefits communities in the north and the northeast of Scotland?
Yeah, no, Elizabeth, that's an excellent question. And, you know, you should know that we are absolutely standing behind the fishing industry. We created this UK Seafood Fund, and I think Scotland is getting a large chunk of that over the next couple of years. You guys probably have the numbers better than me, but it's something like £40 million over the next couple of years is being invested in the Scottish fishing industry. And it's going into all the things that you would expect it to be going into. How do we develop skills for the next generation? How do we improve the productivity and support all these small businesses, often family businesses, to expand their manufacturing and their capabilities? So actually some of the investments we've made, I think one has been in Peterhead in particular, another one in Fort William from memory, but those are the types of places that are receiving investment from this fund to help those small and medium-sized businesses expand. Now obviously also because of Brexit, you know, we've increased all the quotas that we have access to. And in particular, I think the one that we spent a lot of time talking about at the time was mackerel, which is one of our most valuable fishing stocks, but also the one where Scottish fleets are dominant. Something like 90% of the mackerel is caught by Scottish fleets. And because of what we've been able to do post-Brexit, the value of that catch has gone up by 40, 50 million pounds a year. So it's a great opportunity, but that's why we need to invest and support the small and medium-sized businesses in it to take advantage of that opportunity. So that's what we're going to do. And rest assured, you know, I come from a rural constituency, landlocked, but you know, whether it's farming, whether it's fishing, these are things that I care about deeply, and I'll make sure that we continue to support them. And again, one of those things that we all know in this room, that's something that the Conservatives understand deeply, and it's not something that the SNP or Labour will ever prioritise.
Yeah. And indeed, we can see the SNP actually being counterproductive to the fishing industry in Scotland. So, you know, opportunities from the UK government, but with HPMAs, with catching limits and such like. I was up in Shetland a couple of weeks ago, and the fishermen were crying out for a voice in the Scottish Parliament because they know they're not getting that from the SNP and the Greens in government. Rachel Hamilton, our rural affairs spokesperson, is doing great work on that. And again, come back tomorrow. We're doing a lot of rural discussions in our second day tomorrow here in Glasgow.
We've just on that, Douglas, I would just really pay tribute to everyone. Well, these HPMAs, you've done an excellent job of calling out the challenges with those. And again, I know the fishing industry is deeply grateful, but it's a great example. It's the same on DRS. And we were talking about it in PMQs over the last couple of weeks. You know, look, you know, you should all feel incredibly proud, right? The Scottish Conservatives, you took the lead in calling out that that scheme was not something that was going to be workable, that it was going to increase costs for Scottish consumers, for businesses, reduce choice, right? And because of that sustained campaign, ultimately what you've seen is they've paused, they've delayed, they're reforming, right? And that just shows that we're the ones who have got the Scottish people's interests at heart. We understand their priorities, and we're the ones that are better placed to deliver for them.
Absolutely. We have rattled through a range of issues from lots of different members across Scotland. I'm being told we've got one last question that we've got time for. So Duncan, from Glasgow, and we're delighted to have you here in Glasgow for our conference today. Really buoyed by your remarks and your answers to the questions. The final question comes from Duncan, who asks, what can we do to win the next general election?
Now, a couple of things. Look, one, we've got to deliver for people, and that ultimately is the most important thing, right? And that's why I've talked about the 5 priorities. You know, you'll have a set of things that you want to focus on here as well. But we must deliver for people and demonstrate to them that we as a Conservative government are just making their lives better. I think, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, people have had quite enough of politics, politicians, and political chat over the last year or two. What they want is tangible action, and that's what we're going to set about doing. And the last thing I'd say, though, and this is probably the most important thing, and you've done brilliantly at this over the last few years, is we've got to have belief, right? We've got to have belief. Now, it starts in the cabinet. It goes down all the way to every council that we have, to all of you out there knocking on doors. Have the confidence and belief, and there's no reason for us not to, because we know that our values are the values of the British people. We know that our priorities are their priorities. And we know and we can see that we are the ones that will keep delivering for them and making their lives better. And just have that in your head. Go out there with good heart and good cheer. And if we do that over the coming months, I'm absolutely convinced that we can win that next general election, and we're going to do it working very hard together. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Brilliant.